Good morning and welcome to Berry's Garden. Today we have Theresa Walstra back with us and Diane Williams. Theresa and Diane are going to be giving us some insights into what we can expect in the next couple of weeks. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you, Berry. Nice to be here. Zoom is new. Shall I proceed?
You're far away from us. Theresa and I are in South Africa, but in various parts of it, at the opposite ends of it, basically. Yep. And where are you, Diane?
In southern Spain, in a little place called Pinoso, in the south. But I've known Theresa for years. We used to do quite a bit of spiritual work together here and there in Johannesburg.
That's wonderful, and it's so great that we're all in different parts of the earth, but we're all in the same room together.
Yep. Yeah. How technology moved. Yeah, I decided to just sort of do like a 2-week focus, because there's so much different happening in different parts of the world, yet so much of the same. So just general pointers from different aspects of people's lives. I thought maybe that would be appropriate. And then Theresa said she'd throw her spin on it, or the guides, Cynthia's spin on what comes up bullet point. Is that all right, Berry?
That sounds absolutely wonderful. And what I'd like to do right now, though, is just perhaps I know that Theresa and Cynthia like to always open in prayer, and perhaps that would be appropriate. Would one of you like to do that?
All right, let's do that. And then the guides will come through and I'll just sit back after that. Okay, Great Spirit, we ask for your protection as we join with the world of spirit. We ask that you would help us to open our minds and our hearts and our lives to the information that comes through, so that our lives in this earthly plane will be more easy to accept all the changes that come. And we ask that you will bless what we are doing here. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Theresa.
Thank you, Cynthia. Diane.
So looking, I just did some pointers about various aspects of people's lives. So almost like a general horoscope, but I used tarot and I threw some bones and tried to incorporate all of those, like a synergy of tools. What I was picking up, that over the next 2 weeks, 70% of people in general are going to experience some kind of significant shift. Many have already, but this is in the way they look at things in general, their lives. Now, much has been spoken about this already, but for some reason, the next 2 weeks brings the bulk of it, where people have, well, the awakening that we're expecting. So I say we called it a shift of consciousness. Would you like to come in on every part of that, Cynthia? Or shall I read
We
through?
would say to you that certainly this is a time of immense shift. And the difficulty with these shifts is to actually try to ramp up your own energy, to actually resonate with the energy that comes through. And if you do not do that, you will find yourself drowning in the energy that holds you back. And so we would say one of the perhaps learnings in this shift, in these intense, consistent shifts, is that you must accept what has been and move on to what will be. Yes, other comments on this perhaps?
Maybe it's taken this long with this, when did the virus start? For example, in March, that it's taken a lot of people this long to sort of come to some kind of acceptance. And then say, okay, we've got to manage things differently, where many didn't think it was going to happen to them or think it might blow over quickly. But now it's almost like they're in a different frame of mind.
We're losing your sound.
That's what yeah. Have you got the sound?
Yeah, you've just come back now. Would you mind repeating that, because we lost a little of what you said.
It's just that sort of when a lot of with the pandemic, for example, so much came to the fore in March, but a lot of people didn't accept it as going to affect them. But now I'm feeling between now and the 2 weeks ahead, a lot of people are going to be at a point of acceptance and looking at ways they can maneuver their future with having, you know, changes, inevitable changes ahead of them. So it just feels like the bulk of people are going to go through that shift over the next couple of weeks.
May I ask a question here? Do you think that is to do with the stages of grief, acceptance being one of the stages of grief?
Yes. Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. Going through different stages, different people have had different personal experiences and losses, but many are looking a bit further to what's happening in other countries where they might have been more isolated initially. For example, my customers never really asked me a lot about Spain, but now they know what's happening in Spain. So people are taking interest in a bit beyond, you know, sort of not the island mentality that seemed to reign before, whether it was for the Brits or all of us. You know, when I was in South Africa, I was truly only focused on what was happening there. But even South Africa, I get messages daily, what's happening in Spain, what's happening in the UK. So it's like we're expanding and taking more interest in other people further afield as well. So it's like that interconnectedness seems to be, the web seems to be growing, if that makes sense. And it's sort of depicted that way with certain imagery in tarot and the bones, almost like a spider's web.
I'd love to know what card did you draw for us today? What that helped you to these insights?
Okay, well, the different points in the general sense with those things we've touched on now, the Wheel of Fortune, a lot of the karmic cards came up, which it was kind of, that would suggest the inevitable change. I used a Sacred Ancestors deck, which uses a lot of imagery of weaving. And that would have depicted the web that was spreading all over the world and interconnecting us, whether it was with emotions or with the internet. So it's kind of like one reading would confirm the other, whether it's with a certain tarot deck, an inspirational card, or even the bones for that matter.
I'm fascinated by that. How do you work on the internet when people come to you and you throw bones for them, but it's very hard to get a visual on that? Or if it's hard for them, it's hard to get a visual. How do you manage that?
Well, all the work is virtual now. So because calls are mainly quick on the lines I work on, I usually mean tarot. But when people are going to have a bone reading, they'll let me know in advance. So we can try and angle the screen, as well as give me a little bit of time to do my ritual and prepare. And then everything's ready just for each of us to blow on the bones and throw the bones and be on the floor, you know, to do so. So.
And what are your ancestors and the cards telling us about what awaits us at the end of this pandemic? Because it doesn't feel like it always, but we know that it must end at some point.
If you were asking about timing, and this came up in the cards yesterday, timing can be tricky because we're dealing with a lot of human factors and a lot of human leaders, as we know. July came up as very significant for the crux of it having been dealt with internationally. So I wasn't just focusing on Spain or South Africa, I was focusing on an international point of view. And July came up significantly.
So that's very interesting, because that's a great deck to keep in mind, that hopefully things start to ease up around July. Is that optimistic of me, or am I hearing you correctly?
Well, I'm hoping what the reading told me was true.
Well, perhaps we can add our few words to this, and we would say to you, there are several stages of these changes, and they are dependent on your perception, what you are looking at. And those who are listening to this are generally those who have a more spiritual outlook and who are looking towards understanding this. And the quicker that the understanding occurs, the quicker that the change will occur. If you can picture this as a portal from what was into what will be, you will see that those who have a more spiritual understanding will be trying to connect at a very positive level with others and actually take that positivity from themselves and others, resonating to a higher level, stepping through the portal quickly. And so that July is quite important for those who are spiritual, because they will step through that portal and then move on to the new beginnings of their life. July is a very important time. But it is interesting, others who are taking with them the negativity, the shadow of the past, and resonating with others who are also resonating with fear, anxiety, a deep-seated sense that the world is ending. For them, the change will only come later in the year, perhaps November, but they will step through the portal with the weight and the burden of the fear and anxiety and the perception that nothing will ever go right again. And they may well take that into their lives going forward. Yes?
Yes, yes.
So that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, is that right?
Well, that is true of almost all within your world. You set your mind to something, it will occur. You will almost create it because you resonate with it, you attract it, you magnetically absorb that energy, and that is what you will manifest. Yes?
Thank you. Thank you for that input, Sylvia. Cynthia, sorry. Diane, I'd like to just move back to you about speaking about the leadership. You mentioned leadership, and I'm very curious to know how you spoke about leaderships changing, and how does that look to you? What are the cards telling us about how we see and will change our leadership as a result of COVID-19?
Do you mean the people in government leadership?
Well, that's also a great question, because what is leadership? How does leadership change? How does our perception of leadership change? I'm not quite sure. You mentioned earlier about during this time of significant shift, you mentioned about how there's some change of, I think you were talking about the way our perspective changes on leadership. So perhaps that is in a personal way, perhaps it's the leadership we step into in our own lives, perhaps it's a local kind of leadership. What do you see us moving towards? Do you think that governments may topple as a result of this, or do you think that our local organization simply changes?
I'm getting the feeling, yes, because people feel let down, and just what I saw, and I don't watch too much on TV yesterday. People are very angry in Britain because so many medical people have died. They didn't give them protection like they didn't when they sent them to Iraq. They didn't have bulletproof vests. So there's a lot of anti-government feeling. There's a lot of anti-government feeling here. So in terms of that, yes, it's going to make a difference in countries I've seen. I feel some governments or some people in the governments, they'll have to account for what they've done, and some of them be toppled. Yes, yeah. As for South Africa, they feel Ramaphosa's doing a good job, don't they?
Largely doing a very, very good job. He and our health minister, Zweli Mkhize, have really stepped up and have impressed. They really have impressed. Absolutely. Yeah.
So yes, from that leadership, yes. But it was mainly about the shift of consciousness would be where somebody might have seen a leader as an absolute hero. They're seeing things differently now, and so much is getting exposed. So much is
and will be around the world. leadership-wise, as much as individuals may at this point consider that this lockdown was a necessary event, there will be a push against it. Because we would say in countries like the African countries, and perhaps what you would consider to be third world countries, the likely death toll, or what we will celebrate in spirit as the transition times, is likely to rise way above what would inevitably have been the death toll from the virus as a result of starvation. Yes. It is going to become a circumstance which will create revolt against leadership in countries where they have tried to follow what we would call perhaps the Western standard, when in fact they were ill-equipped to deal with it and are becoming more and more so all the time. So we would say it becomes a time of immense transition to spirit world, particularly in countries where they haven't the financial wherewithal to actually withstand this. And that will create revolts, toppling of governments, and there will, the sentiment will change. Whilst it may have been a sentiment of they have done well, it will begin to change now within the next few weeks and become a sentiment of almost hatred at the decision that was made. Yes.
Yeah. So much within these next two and a half weeks ahead feels like, yes, it would be going that way. But there's some fun things in this as well that have come out of it. So many people finding other ways of having fun and interacting, which we've seen happen already. Sharing at home, sharing on the internet. So the internet, as opposed just to be used for more tacky reasons or gain reasons, is being used for more loving and interconnecting reasons. And we're going to see a lot more acts of kindness come to the fore as well on an international level. We're already seeing it with rescue centers and animals, and which is delights me. A lot of people who wanted to be right, I was thinking about my late husband here, or was right, they'd actually be softening their need to be right, because they start to understand there's a lot of things they can't control. So Mr. Right, it's either black or white, it becomes sort of a middle path person. And many were going to be changing their career paths as well. So these are little bits of tids and tads. Anything, Cynthia, on that?
Yes, again, we would say to you, those who are not actually cemented in the energy of fear and anxiety are certainly having a great deal of fun. And the creativity within them now comes to the fore. There will be changing of jobs and changing of the way jobs are done. There will be a great deal more loving kindness. And it is set to actually change perception of many in the world, because for many it will become a world where there is a greater ability to love and share love. And again, we say to you, the reading you have done was chosen specifically for those who will watch this. And it is interesting to note that most who will watch this recording will be those who will have fun, and who will make those changes, and who will prosper, and who will experience a great deal more love. It is a time of intense love, but you must understand that it is also a time of intense greed for those who choose that. But a few of those will watch this recording. And so the cards were chosen for those who will watch this. Not necessarily just for yourself, but for those who are spiritually minded and open to those concepts. Yes?
And they'll find that having so much fun is going to improve their well-being and their health. Despite the virus going on, they're actually going to feel better. Their immune systems are going to be prompted.
Yes, and love is at a very high level at this present time for those individuals. It is a beautiful time of love, sharing love at every aspect of love, at every level of love. It is a beautiful, wondrous time of love. Yes.
Lots of rekindling, but also Lawyers are going to be busy because there'll be, I feel, the equal amount of splits. This would, people who are going to split anyway, it would have just given them that little shove. But a lot of couples, families, distant families, rekindling, trying to reach out, trying to track down, find one another. So
Yes.
yeah. So in that, love, and a lot of people separating for love, so the other one can get on with their lives.
Yes, getting on to new things. Absolutely. You cannot build a new house until you have broken down the old one.
The tower came up again, didn't it? Right. Yes. And one of the big things, and I'm sure you want to add to this, so many people now are starting to look for deeper reasons for why this happened. So, I mean, how do you tell a customer, oh, it was meant to be because? I mean, we'd have to break them in gently. You know, it's a global awakening, the teaching said, but somebody who's new to this, there has to be a way to break them in gently.
Well, we would say to you, you need to understand. And we go back again to what the lady Berry mentioned of grief. This is a time of grief. You need to understand that you, in your earthly experience emotions by comparison. So the sadder you have been, the happier you have the capacity to be. And whilst at sad times and at times of loss, you may feel that you cannot feel the opposite emotion.
Absolutely.
But you have now the capacity to feel it. And what you need to keep reminding all of yourselves is that 10 years ago, you may have gone through difficult circumstances. 20 years ago, you may have gone through difficult circumstances, and you firmly believed at the time that nothing could change. But look at you now. You have come out through that. You may be going through another downswell again, but it hollows you out to experience the positive and the opposite. You can only experience in the human form by using the opposite emotions. And so whilst this may seem like a dreadful time, nothing remains unchanged. And this is a time of intense and powerful change. So it brings to you intense, beautiful and powerful change as well. Yes?
Yes. Yeah.
Diane, I want to ask, what would you say to people? How would you say to people that this is how you can keep your spirits up? This is how you can keep the light on in your heart. How do you express that to people?
In a small way, and a lot of my readings are quite short ones, would be a focus on little gratitude lists, just to begin with, and then as we get more calls and more into it, you know, point them in the way of a teaching which might be appropriate for them, teachings of Emmanuel or Deepak Chopra, for example, and point them in the direction, getting into a meditation if they're not used to that before. But making a gratitude list every morning. Oh, my dog's well, it was sick yesterday. Small things that they wouldn't normally notice. And that's a start. Just the attitude of gratitude, I think, is the best beginning for people who are used to sort of chasing their tail, you know, and striving for more and more and more. And it's like all they know is, especially in Spain, constant socials and dressing up and yeah, I've been speaking to some of the Spanish about doing it that way as well. That's my advice.
It is also important to understand that love is experienced when it is shared. So whether you are remembering love or whether you are experiencing love by giving it to someone else, love can only be experienced in your world when it is shared. Yes. And
taking the time to acknowledge, you know, that this could come from a John Edwards concept. Just acknowledge somebody, validate them. Your pets, maybe you gave more attention to one than the other. Validate somebody for doing something special. A lot of people, and I know from calls internationally, they've got nobody to talk to. Sometimes they phone for a reading because they've got nobody to talk to. It's very sad. So for everybody to reach out and validate and take an interest in somebody and who they are and what they're feeling and what matters to them. You know? I think they're doing a lot of that in the UK. It's not such a big need in Spain because people tend to help one another more. That'll change. But in the UK, the older people just dying of loneliness. They've got nobody. So this is also encouraging people to knock on doors and see who's on their own and make that call. So yes, validating, making the other person know that they count. Spreading that word.
And you mentioned earlier playfulness, which is, I also think, it reminds me of a quote by, I think, a man called Bernard de Koven, who said, "Play, when it becomes deep enough, can heal the world."
Oh, really?
It's one of my
When
favorite.
it becomes deep enough. So that could be when the pain is deep enough?
No, play. When play becomes deep enough, it can heal the world. So basically what I think what he's really getting at is how play shifts and lifts our energy.
Well, they say that about a comedy, you know, people's, is it their pheromones, their hormones change
Laughter.
when they had an hour belly laugh. Yeah. And just with your animals, you know, they come in and they do the most crazy things. It's joyous. They show you how to just let go and stop taking things so seriously. Then I say, okay, give me a minute. I've got to make money. I've got to feed you. So drawing the line kind of thing. But they're my biggest joy. And to hear more birds singing here, even in Spain. So this is interesting. More and more people are going to be making their voices heard about the fear. And you mentioned that at the beginning, and that's something that came up in the reading. So many people talking about the fear. And a lot of it is fear they've picked up from TV. They've seen the figures of infections and dead, but they're not looking at the numbers that have been cured. So that's why sometimes on Facebook we try and promote the numbers that are actually getting cured. So I wonder if that's the media trying to sort of put fear into people.
Yes, the media has been playing a very important role in creating this fear. But we would say, again, it is necessary to bring this change into your world. As much as it may be something that you would avoid, many cannot avoid it. And we would say that what is interesting is how the media has downplayed how every year viruses move around the world and kill as many people. And we would say to you that opportunity for transition is created. Viruses are created to give the opportunity for transition, or you would all need to make the transition by violent means. Yes?
Yeah. So in other words, it's a way to go home or to experience that sickness.
Yes, and if you look at the figures from last year's virus and the year before and the year before, you will see that hundreds of thousands make the transition every year as a result of virus. Somehow the media has latched on to this one to make it more. And we would say it is necessary to create the fear, to change the structure within your world, to change the organization, the leadership, the way you perceive things. In reaching out to others, in experiencing loneliness at this level, you have been given the opportunity to understand how others feel. And whilst that may have been something that was in the back of your mind at all times, now it will be in the front of your mind. And it will change the way those who are healers work with others in your world. Even for them, that healing perception will be greater, stronger, more powerful. It shifts the energy within your world. And it was a necessary shift, all right?
Thank you, Cynthia. Yes. Diane, do you feel that we are knowing the truth, that we're hearing the truth about the figures and about the virus?
No, no, I really don't. I got the same sense of doubt as when I was in Joburg, and they said they'd gone into Afghanistan and found weapons. It's just that sense of I don't believe it.
So that's an interesting perspective on it as well. And because those kind of truths are not available to us, perhaps we should just not be giving them the energy. Perhaps it's actually really to focus on ourselves and our own. What I'm hearing from you is really to focus on ourselves and our own, maintaining our own space, as it were, our own inner ecology, and keeping ourselves in good spirits and in loving relationship with the world and the people around us.
Exactly. You know, I've got a friend who's sending me messages every minute. She's panicking about the people dying of starvation, and she's you know, she's got the teachings, Emmanuel, other teachings of you know, people will choose to go home by different means, but she's just getting into a panic about, say, in the surrounds, in the townships, of the amount of people dying of starvation and rioting and that kind of thing. So how do we help people to get through that and sort of, like you say, Barry, focus more on what you can do yourself?
And you know, those people, so just speaking very personally, I haven't been driving around at all. I've been totally in this house for 28 days, a month. And so I'm not using my petrol money. So to take something like that out of your budget that is not being used, that was designated for something that you no longer need, and that money can buy a food parcel for a family. Yes, it's one food parcel for one family for 1 week, but what a difference it makes to that family. So it's a case of each one help one. If you can help one person. So that's what I've been saying to people who are very concerned, and we should all be very concerned about the people who are starving. And I love that out with kindness.
Yeah, they're showing other countries, but we know, and I know from my travels into Africa, that a lot of the parcels that get sent, they don't get to their destination, the UNICEF and what have you. They just don't arrive there.
I think fortunately, being on the ground here in South Africa, I have connections in those areas where people are starving, and
South Africa, yes,
make sure that I can help the right people. And I think it's that personal connection as well that maybe helps. Cynthia, do you have any final thoughts or words that you would like to share with us?
Well, we would say to you that this transition is about you as an individual. And whilst it will affect others, and you will interlink with others, and you will create the network and the web with others who resonate with you, we would say to you, focus on your own vibration at this time. This is not an easy transition for you all to make. And it is a transition that requires for you to find peace within and work from the peace within to create, first of all, your environment, and then to recreate the environment of those you love. So we would say to you, focus on the self. As much as you may want to focus on the rest of the world, there is little you can do. Yes?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Cynthia. What about you, Diane? Do you have a last thought for us? Something
the last thought was sort of the last pointer that I picked up in the reading. And yes, it is just a forecast for 2 weeks, but it suggested that some kind of agreement or accord would be struck internationally regarding the pandemic. So in other words, instead of this, what we've been seeing the past few days, pointing fingers and arguing, and well, we know what's been going on, that some kind of accord would be struck to sort of like work together. Instead of pointing at China, China's sending the medical equipment. In other words, just stop this. Let's just get this sorted now and face our differences later. So it feels like there's hope for that kind of agreement to take place.
Would you like to take a guess at specifically where that agreement might come from or who might be involved in that?
I feel it would be the European government and the South African most likely, UK government, sort of stepping on Trump a bit.
Okay. We would say there will be 3 specific groups that will join together, and each of them will have a slightly different focus. One being the American focus, which will not lead all of the others, but the other 2 groups will be made up of several countries around the world, and they will eventually merge together, and they will drive what will be, let us call it, rescue remedies for the world in general. Yes, but accords begin to take place now because it is important. It shifts the world order, and certainly you will see that taking place, all right?
More people standing up to stop the bickering. You know, there's a lot of Chinese people here getting attacked with stores. They do good jobs here just because the ignorant think that, you know, they've brought the virus to Spain and in other countries the same. And there are certain leaders who provoke that.
Thank you so much, ladies. Our time has come to an end. Diane, would you like to tell us quickly how to contact you?
On info@bonethrower.com. And Theresa's got all the details.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for inviting me. I was nervous.
You're wonderful. Thank you. It was a lovely conversation. Cynthia,